Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Angela.
And this is NFGeeks. Well, Angela, thanks. Welcome back.
I'm glad to be back.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to talk to you a couple things. Mike, as we all know, did a very special episode called When the Universe Speaks. It was about your friend, and
Yep.
we were all very sorry to hear that you lost somebody that close to you. But
Sure, thank you, Angela.
we, and I really watched very closely to this, and I know that you and I had spoke about it before you even did the video.
Yes, I actually ran it. You were my test subject.
Yes,
you
I was
Mike,
the guinea pig
your
for this.
boyfriend, yeah.
But it really did. When you say the universe speaks to you, that's really what I got for it. And I don't know if, like we were talking about, maybe it's just an NF thing. I know that, and I read some of the comments on the video where maybe some of the NTs weren't as convinced. But I really just wanted to ask you a little more about your feelings about it, and just a few more things about it, and about your friend, and just about in general how you feel about how the progression happened, where you guys grew up together. He went kind of down this spiral here, and then up
Sure.
to when he died, and how you kind of felt. And I know that you said that you had some anger, that it was kind of misplaced at first, and you didn't really know where it was. So I don't know if you can just kind of elaborate a little bit more
Sure.
on it for me.
All right. Well, let's start with like current feelings. Well, I'm glad to revisit the topic because even though that was a long video and it was all just myself going on and on and on, it doesn't capture everything that I experienced. Because I had a decades-long relationship with him. 40 years. Imagine the relationships you have for 20 years or 15 years with friends. Now multiply that times 2, 3. It's an enormous amount of time.
Yeah.
So there is so much to. I still want to go back. Like this revisiting, talking about it. There's still a lot there. So all right. So let's break down some of the things you wanted to know. Give me like one thing. And I'll respond.
My one thing I really want to know is just kind of how you felt about how he lived his life in general.
Oh, sure. I never approved of his lifestyle. I never did. Even though I engaged in it back and forth occasionally, because it's friends. You want to hang out with friends.
Yeah,
you want to want to do things. I didn't disapprove either. I have to admit, because he didn't started getting really bad until the last couple of years. But he was always partying and whatever. But he was sort of living free and happy about it, and he didn't seem initially depressed or anything. He was probably a functioning alcoholic, but he was sort of happy about the fact that he had his own life, and he had all these girls around him, and he was gigging, and he had he didn't have lots of money, but his money was his, and he was partying, and he wasn't unhappy about it. But as time went on, it became harder and harder to deal with, and this has to do with being a parent. Because when you're a parent, everything changes for you. Eric Erickson talked about this. And that everything changes for you, and you start seeing things differently in society, So when you become a parent, you don't want to be out till midnight. As fun as that might sound, you really don't. You'll be up at midnight at home, but you don't want to be up till midnight because you don't know. Is the kid going to be in the hospital?
You don't know, yeah.
You don't know, so you don't want to, you want to go home. And he could never grasp that because he was an only child and, no wife, no children, So it became harder and harder to be with him because he would want to go out and do things till 2, 3, 4 in the morning.
And he couldn't understand that you had your own things. You had, you were married, you had your son, you were trying to do the right, be a parent, be a father, be a husband, things like that.
Sure.
And it just kind of wasn't.
The worst, the last really big episode, the worst one, not the worst, but the time when I said, okay, I'm done with this. It was about 8 or 10 years ago. And I went to his house, and he was one of these guys who had like gigantic bongs. Like a bong the size of a tank. You know what I mean? Like smoking out of a turret, like these huge, huge things. And so, so we always had a lot of grass. And like I knew it was going to rain that night, like there was a storm coming. So I didn't want to like smoke, but he would like pressure. You know what I mean? Come on, let's party. He was one of those.
Peer pressure.
Right, and like, so I ended up smoking out of this thing more than I ever should have. Okay. And so I finally said, look, I got to go. So I get into the car, I'm still flying. I get in the car and I'm driving home and it starts pouring. Now, this may not be a big deal, but I'm on a highway and it's a weeknight because it was in the summer. When I teach, sometimes in the summer I don't teach every day, so it was like a weeknight. It's like 2 a.m. I didn't want to leave at 2. Like I wanted to leave like 2 hours earlier, and there's no cars on this highway in either direction, no lights, and I can't see the road, and I can't see the lines in the road, and there's nobody there to help me, and I'm high. Okay, on this road.
God.
And I was horrified. I mean, just absolutely talk about panic attack. And when I got home, and I made it home, because I was driving like 2 miles an hour, so it took like, 2
took
hours.
You 3 hours.
Right, to drive 20 miles.
Yeah.
But when I finally got home, I was just like, I am just not doing this again. I mean, that's it. I mean, that is it. I've placated this enough. I wasn't really thinking about him, but I was thinking I cannot participate in his lifestyle anymore because this was hair raising. You know. I mean, it was just scary, and then I felt stupid too. Like, oh God, I should just been home anyway. Really. So I couldn't. I became less and less enamored with it. To answer the first question was, what was my feelings about his lifestyle? In my 20s, I was more fascinated by it. It was like a great adventure he was on. But the time I got through my 30s, I was less impressed with it and started spending a little less time with him. And like 2 years ago, I was actually disgusted with him. He drunk dialed me right after my mother died. And totally drunk dialed me. Didn't even know what time it was.
Yeah.
So that's what I was like. I was like, Jesus Christ,
He's really going down to
right.
bad.
But I was mad at him for doing that, and I didn't realize he was on that slope. Yeah. He was, obviously, at that time. But I was mad. I was just fed up with him.
It was more anger rather than maybe he needs help.
Oh, right. It was absolutely anger. My mother just died. He's drunk dialing me. He didn't go to the funeral or anything. I'm like, fuck you. That was really I'm laying in my bed.
I probably would have kicked his ass.
Right. He's calling me at like 6 a.m. thinking it's 6 p.m. That's how loaded he was.
Wow.
So at 6 a.m, I'm listening to him talk on my answering machine. I'm like, dude, fuck you. I'm not even picking up that phone, you idiot. And I just went back to sleep. That was the last time I heard his voice. Too, So that's that. That's my feelings about it.
Well, and then it kind of brings you almost to that place too, where when you think about that now that he's gone, and you think about the last time I heard his voice, I was so angry I couldn't even take it.
Sure, and it's a mixed feeling because part of me feels justified too. Like, dude, you're drunk dialing me. I just buried my mother, and you're drunk dialing me. I mean, so there's this. So it's a mixed bag. For me on that. So what else?
Well, I was a little, I don't want to say disturbed, but at the same time, the progression of the pictures up until the last one, which if any of you didn't watch this, watch the video and you'll know what we're talking about. And especially the NFs, you will freak out when you see it, I promise you. And that was the picture at the end, which was, there's a few things on it that I don't know if a lot of people caught it, but I caught these things. I want to know how you feel about it. Was in this picture, and I can explain it briefly, was his friend is standing in front of the mirror, and he had a vast hundreds and hundreds of pictures where he was just flipping the finger off to random things. And, we had discussed that it was kind of like an artist thing. It was how he felt. But this last picture was a long time before he even died. This was in no way related.
No, easily 10 to 15 years. Yeah. Like, it was probably taken in the late 90s.
Okay. So it was easily that. And he has a shot of whiskey in his hand with the finger just like this, holding the thing of whiskey. And he's standing in the mirror. He's got the camera, he's taking a picture of himself. And there's fire, which it was, probably the picture.
Superimposed.
But it really messes with you when you think about it, because the flame, it's not like you can clearly see that it's two pictures mushed together. All you can see is the flames up underneath just him, no other part of it. And the other thing I caught, and I don't know if you caught it because in the video you didn't mention it, was the camera covers his face. His entire face is covered.
Yeah, that's right. He, because if you think about it, he easily could have just done what everybody does. Now
gone to the side,
and he was doing things with the side with his finger, so I mean he knew how to move the camera. So right, it was blacking his face. Other people have said that too. I didn't think about that because I was just looking at the fire, and it didn't occur to me. But yeah, he's blocking. It's almost like he's hiding himself through the camera.
Yeah.
On top of all this.
Almost like this is my vision of myself that I'm saying, fuck myself in my own thing, but then he kind of hid himself. And then the fire gets added. It really messed with me. And I don't know if you felt the same way now that you know, now, like you said, a lot of other people have brought it up the same way. And I don't know, I don't know how to compare it to other things. That just, you never understand why these things happen, but when it does happen, you feel like it fits perfectly. Like, if this had happened to anybody else, we wouldn't even be talking about it.
No, right. It would be a random thing,
It would
and you
just be
wouldn't
like,
even
oh, that's
care.
kind of interesting,
Right.
whatever.
It's in the. It's what Carl Jung would call synchronicity. You know, random events,
Yes.
but within the consciousness have deep meaning. They're not random.
Because to anybody else, it wouldn't have any kind of meaning.
No, right. It wouldn't. You know, it wouldn't have any meaning at all.
And even if you had shown somebody this picture without telling them the background to the story, or that this person was dead, or anything like that, I don't think it would have made a difference either way either.
No, that's right.
You know, and that was kind of my thought process, was just kind of getting your feeling on that and letting you know that everything that you showed in that video, I felt with you. Was that I really did connect in that way. And I don't know if maybe that was just our NF-ness that was kicking in, but, you know, I really felt that. I felt like I could understand how you were feeling at those point in times. And, you know, I've had an instance in my life where, you know, you and I have talked about this before, of dealing with issues with a friend or with a family member or with somebody that you care about deeply, and seeing them go down that path. And you feel like it almost makes it more painful that there's nothing you can do about it.
Sure.
And I don't know if you feel the same way, but
sure, there wasn't anything. I mean, that's sort of actually that's part of the anger. I used to chastise him about this when we were teenagers in the before time. You know, in the 80s, really, but in the 80s, I was like, dude, let's not. I was even then, I was like, I didn't want any part of it.
It was just too much.
You're right, it was too much. Like, I didn't mind going over to his house. You know, he lived a few houses down from me. You know, going to his house. It's teenagers. You know, going to the basement.
Yeah.
You know, see, people have been doing that for decades. You know, going to the basement and hanging out and partying a little bit. But like, he would have like friends over, partying, drinking, dropping acid, all sorts of things going on for like a day. Like, you know, I would see him, you know, I'd go over there and hang out, and there'd be like a bunch of guys that'd all be either smoking or having acid or mushrooms or alcohol, sorts of major partying going on. And, you know, I'd see them for like an afternoon till like dinner time or whatever. And then like I would come by the next day, the same guys are still there in the same spot. You know, they'd been tripping, you know, all day. You know, and this happened all the time. You know, it was just a major, you know, just like any other drug thing. You know, people are just sitting around high for like...
just losing days at a time.
Literally, right, exactly, losing days at a time. And at least I had the wisdom to keep it at arm's length. You know what I mean? Like, nobody was... like, my parents didn't know. Nobody in my family knew this was going down. Yeah. So at least I had enough common sense to say, okay, I am not jumping in with this because this is scary to me. Yeah. But I couldn't stop him either, even then. And he never listened to me. He never, ever listened to me. He never did. You know, even then. And so any criticism fell on deaf ears. Yeah. You know, about it. So there's that kind of anger going in with it. You know.
Well, and I don't know if there's anything else that you felt about it, that maybe something else that you could share to kind of help me understand a little bit more about the feelings, because the thing, you know, obviously we have an age gap too on top of it, where you know, I don't have children, I don't have other things in my life that accumulate to the anger of...
No, and that makes a difference, and that's interesting, because this is going to come up in another video that
okay.
I make, okay?
All right.
So I'm going to talk about it now, talk about it later, and that is that there are developmental differences between the ages. It doesn't mean that each age is necessarily better than the others, but there's different experiences, and the difference between being older and being younger, and there's a difference in wisdom, and it doesn't mean young people are dumb or anything. I wasn't dumb when I was young, you know, but there is a difference, and part of the difference here is that there's decades involved, like 40 years of it. I mean, it's hard to describe again because of the age difference. But the reason why it's impacted me so long isn't because I knew this guy for 5 years, or 10 years, or even 20 years. I mean, 40 years. I mean, I've known him since the early 70s. You know, if you're a hipster, or just a young person, you know, ponder that. Ponder like something from the early 70s. I mean, can you even imagine the early 70s? Yeah. You know, so that amount of time, and that amount of time dealing with him with all these antics too. Yeah. You know, decades of dealing with him. Not years, decades, you know. Yeah. That adds into the experience of it, and that's why it's not just, you know, that's why there's anger about it, like, Jesus Christ. You know, we've been dealing with, you know, if I was talking to you, like, I've been dealing with you with this shit for decades, and now this is what you do. You know, on top of that, top of like the burden that you've been caused, making everyone crazy with this partying, you've now self-destructed.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's not, and I don't, I mean, I don't know the whole situation either, but it seems like it kind of dropped very quickly on everybody too. That it wasn't like, we all know he has an issue, we all know he needed help, but he didn't take it, and then he went down this way. It kind of just happened.
Yeah.
Randomly.
Well, he went off a cliff. Like, this is how it seems. He went off a cliff. He wasn't that bad, at least as far as I could tell, 5 years ago, 4 years ago. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
You know, I saw him about 5 years ago at his mother's, maybe it was even less than that, like 3 or 4 years ago at his mother's wake. And he didn't seem that bad then. But at some point, he decided, it was a choice. That's why it went so fast. It's not like he accidentally did it, like the way pop stars do.
Most people do.
Right. It wasn't an accident. He thought it through. He said, this is it. I'm just going to do it till it breaks me, you know? And that's what happened. You know?
Well. All right. Oh, I think that's everything I wanted to know. I just really wanted to kind of dig a little bit more into it and, you know, let you know that I really did understand a lot of things that you brought up, and just that they did get to me, and that you're not the only one that feels like the universe has its own you know, ideas about how everything's supposed to work, and how, you know, people come in and out of your life. And, you know, I had a lot of people that I lost early. I had friends that I lost to suicide, to cancer, to accidents, you know, horrible accidents. I lost a friend when I was 14 to a horse accident, you know, just random things.
And it, you know, it actually brings up a good point. I tried to explain in the video and to others about this, and that is that, you know, it's not magic what's going on with this in the picture. It is mysterious. It's mystical, but mystical and magic are not the same thing. Mystical just means mystery, a process that is occurring that it cannot be defined. Magic implies a force, you know, some kind of other
an extra thing to the side.
Yeah. Right. So what I'm really trying to show is that, you know, our consciousness impacts reality. And what's going on with us emotionally, physically, spiritually, morally, is impacting the physical world. And so why wouldn't the physical world reflect that back? If you think about it simply, like in a simple metaphor, if you put your hand in the sand, you know, I mean, at a beach, a wet sand, you pull your hand out, there's going to be an impression of your hand in the sand, so, you know, from you interacting with the sand, and it's going to be you, your hand. Why wouldn't everything else work this way? You know, why wouldn't anything else be you interact with the universe and you're leaving your mark in all sorts of ways, not just physically in the sand, but artistically, emotionally. You know, you're affecting the space with whatever it is you do and whatever it is you are. Even NFGeeks in the YouTube, are impacting the hyper reality of the internet. But we are, you know what I mean? You and I now, we're leaving an imprint on the internet from our consciousness. And then something is being reflected back. And here's the thing, I don't know. Am I on fire? I mean, you know what I mean? Am I going to, you know, when I die, people go say, look, Mike, he died in China. And look, you know, am I projecting something now? I don't know, you know. But we are impressing something into reality from our consciousness. Yeah. And then something's coming back. I mean, that's the same thing about YouTube and the same thing that he did. So I don't know. We may look at this and be like, you know, Mike's wearing brown. He died in a giant cow shit pile. And isn't that ironic, you know? It could be, I don't know. Hopefully that's not the reality.
Oh
but I don't know. I might be projecting something that might be saying something, you know?
And I think it goes the other way, too, where you could see a big event that happens, that it affects hundreds of thousands of people in hundreds of thousands of different ways.
Yes.
Like, even just to be general so that everybody else knows what we're talking about. You know, even like, you know, an accident or a plane crash or, you know, something that happens in that instance, it affects everybody the same way, but also 100 different ways.
Sure.
Different people are going to have a physical reaction, an emotional reaction, a mental reaction. You know, some people might just even go off the deep end because of something that happened.
That's a great NF thing to talk about, because a lot of NFs, and you can think if you have this, have moments before the big event. So, for example, I have one of those. It's minor, but I remember it distinctly. So, believe it or not, okay, the Labor Day weekend before 9/11, I was in Manhattan. Okay, if they had done this a week before, I would have been there. So I was in New York City Okay, I was visiting my sister. My sister lives on the Upper East Side of New York,
Yeah.
and so it was around my birthday was right after that, and so I just went by myself. I didn't hang out with my sister or anything. I was going to go to Greenwich Village and spend money and all that. And so I'm walking down, Times Square, and I decide that I'm going to walk to the World Trade Center. And I'm just going to walk and like just take it in. And so I started walking down towards the World Trade Center. I think I don't know if it's Broadway or whatever. But you end up, going south in Manhattan. And the way it was, if it used to be in New York, the way a World Trade Center would loom, as you started going from Midtown to downtown, it just sort of filled the sky. And it was just so, and Greenwich Village is kind of around there, not exactly near it, but in the same sort of direction. So as I was sort of trying to get my way to Greenwich Village, I'm heading towards the World Trade Center. I could see it, and I just felt that I needed to take it in, that this was special. I needed to take some time, and I need to like look at these buildings. And I actually ended up walking all the way to the World Trade Center, I didn't go in, but I went up to it and looked like straight up at it, and just sort of like, I don't know, felt the need to like really bring in these buildings. I'm not even making this up. This is NF shit. This happens, And then I left, and then like a week later they're gone. I mean, like this was like a Monday, the week before. Like the Labor Day before.
And it probably made you crazy that you were like, holy shit.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, I was just there. Like if they decided to do this like a week before, the debris would have been falling on me. But that's not as interesting as the fact that I was compelled, for whatever reason, to go to it. Like I just knew I had to go and like take in these buildings.
Almost like I'm never going to see this again in my life.
Right. I mean, like exactly. And, I mean, I didn't say it like that, but I thought but it was sort of a feeling of, I don't know if I'm going to have this opportunity again. I should take in this major thing.
Little did you know.
That was right.
Oh my God.
So, right. Important things. So to reiterate this back with my friend John, right, the realities in the universe are also, it's mutual causal. Things are happening to us and we're interacting with these events, or just reality, whatever that is. I mean, it could be something, this could be nebulous. It doesn't have to be like totally the physical world that we're talking about.
And it happens and it's funny that you brought it and not funny, but that,
Yeah, 9/11, very comical. Yeah, it's a ton of laughs, right? I always wanted to write, ready? I always wanted to write 9/11 the musical. Okay, I did. 9/11 the music,al
Oh, God.
Someday there's gonna be 9/11 the musical. You wait. Like I always thought, like the first song would be one of those like good morning songs. We're going to work.
Christ.
It's the morning.
Oh
everyone's getting on trains. 9/11 the musical.
Oh God, we're gonna get so many terrible. Anyway, I have
Go ahead.
The thing that came up with that.
Sure.
I have a friend, my friend that I was actually supposed to bring on the show, but then he bailed. But we had spoken about this before, where his sister was actually there on 9/11.
Really, in New York?
She was at the front step of the Trade Center when she saw the plane come in and hit, and she had a lot of, as you can probably guess, a lot of PTSD because she watched. There were people fall. There were people
jumpers.
fell.
Right.
Not even that. People that stuff from the planes fell and things like that. And as she's running away, she could hear it. She could hear it. She could smell everything. She could just everything just went crazy. And it was a really crazy time for their family because they were all coming in to see her. She lived in New York. And then this all happened. They got stuck. They were freaking out because she lived right there. And it was this big thing. But it ended up changing her life forever because she was in college. She didn't know what she wanted to do. She ended up becoming a psychologist, dealing with PTSD, dealing with things. And she ended up becoming like this really crazy psychologist in New Mexico that she helps people. And it changed her life.
Yes. A guy in Harvard named Robert Keegan who has this really awesome developmental theory that I really should talk about in class. I never do.
Why don't you? I think we should write this down.
I don't know, because there's all these other things I have to talk about that they make me talk about.
The damn things they make us talk about.
Right, so I can't, I can't fit it all in. But he would call that a transformative event. Okay, and that's something we should do a video on, maybe the next one. But a transformative event is something that happens to you that breaks the equilibrium of your life and totally sends things in a way. So that equilibrium never returns. Positive or negative. It could be a bad equilibrium, but something comes in and impacts your life in a way that now you're forever altered and you go in a direction. And my friend's death was a transformative event. This has been the most traumatic death I have ever experienced. And my whole family's dead. Okay, every adult I ever grew up with has died. They were all old.
And I know
born
this
late in
this
life.
changed your life significantly. I mean, you
Yes.
automatically right after this happened, what did you do? You bought the bike.
Right.
You started the diet. You've
bike.
been on ever since.
Yeah.
You started all these things.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely. I decided that he chose death, and I'm going to choose life.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do that. I'd like to bring us back to, that's good, because I want to bring us back to the Myers-Briggs a little bit, because one of the things that isn't lost on me is the fact that he was an ESFP. I think that matters, okay? Because I've known a lot of ESFPs, and they're very funny and they're a lot of fun. But I've also seen he's not the only ESFP I've ever seen kind of go off the party cliff. You know, that doesn't mean they all go off the party cliff, but I've certainly seen enough to think that there's something going on with that. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the need for sensation. I don't know, but there's something to that. And interestingly, and this is interesting to think about too, is I knew another ESFP who was an alcoholic, and this person's life was a lot worse than my friend John's, and same age as me and him. They didn't know each other. This is sort of another circle.
Yeah.
But she was also an alcoholic, serious alcoholic, and had a horrible life, all sorts of trauma and horrible things, far worse than his. He's an only child, middle class parents. I mean, that was his. But she somehow got into AA and cleaned up, and even though she had this worst life experience and was also an alcoholic,
she changed for the better.
Right, she was able to go in this other direction that he was not, and I'm curious as to what's the difference that's involved, and I'd also like to see how that relates to Myers-Briggs. I don't know if it does or it doesn't, because they were both ESFPs, so that's interesting to me. They both had this tendency. They both were major party people. They both ended up alcoholics, but one decided to die and the other one decided to clean up. And I don't know if it was because other people got involved or what.
But I mean, it also, if you think about it, contributes to, look at how many people there are in the world that do drugs and drink alcohol, and compare the numbers of who moves on to change their lives and not do it, and who goes right off the cliff and goes right back down, and how many people die from overdoses and suicides and things like that, and that really shows you that in any scenario it can go either direction.
Sure, I guess it seems that the stereotype is that you would think the other person who had the shittier life, the shittier parents, would be the one who would go off of the deep end, whereas my friend, who college graduate, he was
had a good
teacher,
life, had parents who loved him, everything.
Had owned a house, he owned a property. I mean, it wasn't like a home; it was like tenement. He was a landlord. I mean, he had like things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, what was the difference between the destruction and the person who overcame it? Was it human interaction? Was it somebody intervening? And I don't know her story. I'll have to find her story.
Yeah.
And find out if it is.
That makes me think too of like the people who you think about the people who are overweight, those people who end up becoming so large that they have to get cut out of their own house, and those people that decide, whatever, I'm going to make a life change, I'm going to do what's better for myself so I don't have a heart attack at 38 years old. And
I mean, this would be, I guess, morbid, but not as morbid, I guess, as 9/11, the musical. But like, I would be curious for those people, like, to find out what their Myers-Briggs types were, and if there was any correlation. You know what I mean? And I would love to do this for all sorts of mental illnesses and problems. So, like, for example, are there particular Myers-Briggs types that would relate to the person who has to get, airlifted out of their house, for the helicopter or whatever?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
I mean, I don't know if there are, and I couldn't even guess. But, and if it doesn't relate, then is there something specific to their type? So if an ISTJ, like my son, not that he's like this, but if an ISTJ is doing this, is there an ISTJ-ness to this overweightness? Does it relate back to his specific type? Or an ENFP? Is there something ENFP about it?
Well, I feel like, too, if you think about it this way, where an NF may think of overweight as, I want to see myself as a good person. I want to see myself as being healthy. I want other people to, I want somebody to love me, and nobody's going to love me if I'm fat and all this other stuff that NFs do. But maybe other types, the more not more, I don't want to say that NFs are not intellectual, but the more intellectually driven types that would think more like, well, I don't want to have a heart attack at 38. I don't want to have health problems. I don't want to have cholesterol issues. I feel like that plays a little bit of a role in it.
Sure.
Whereas personality intellectually, meaning like, like I just said, NFs think of it more that way. Whereas, just trying to think of like a way to say it without being too much stereotypical, but do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like that might play a little bit of a role in it.
Right. So like people's dysfunctions might be directly related to their personality type.
Yeah.
That's
On
right.
top of the opposite way around, where those people who are more aware of it would be the skinnier people.
Right. But your strengths would also come from that.
Yeah.
From your type. Too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're over our time, so that's great.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you, Angela.
Thanks.